Well, welcome back to the Business Roundtable podcast. I'm one of your hosts here, David Carr of Steward Your Business, where I'm helping teams come together to accomplish great things. And I have Bill back. Welcome back, Bill.
Thank you, sir. Good to be back.
Yeah, glad to have you back. It's been a few episodes, so Bill's one of our regulars here, and I thought this would be actually a good conversation for both of you and I, Bill. We are in the first part of November here. And for those of you that here are listening in the United States, we had a big election in the last week. And so inevitably there's always winners and losers and whether it's the presidential race on down. I thought, this happens. There's expectations about policy or direction, and inevitably it doesn't always go the way we envisioned or thought. And so I thought, we could apply this to business owners, leaders. When you face policies or procedures that don't align with your expectations, how do you adapt? How do you respond and actually even thrive in such situations, especially keeping your teams engaged and focused? So, Bill, I know you have a great background in the ethics and a lot of things about how we show up as leaders, and so I just thought this would be a good one to jump into. And
Yeah.
maybe if you're up for it, Bill, I'll give you the example of the election as one, but can you think of in all of your experiences where you had an expectation or thought this policy or procedure was going to go one way, and then it's like, oh wow, that turned on me, and just kind of share a little bit about your background there.
Oh wow. Well, trying to think of a good example. Um,
Hmm.
yeah, I know now the elections, everything taking up all my brain space. Uh,
Yeah. Well, here, I'll give you one while you're thinking.
but
Here's one that came up for me. I remember
mhm.
um, early on in my career, they were talking about doing a modified schedule, allowing us to work like a 980 schedule, get every other Friday off. And
Mm.
they kept talking about it, like, oh, this is going to happen, this is going to happen. Well, it eventually didn't happen because the higher ups kind of put the kibosh on it. And, I was looking forward to that. And so I had to adjust my expectations. And it was one of the early on experiences I had working in an organization where they said they were going to do one thing and they were going in a direction, they were indicating that it would be that way, and then ultimately it didn't turn out the way I thought it was going to be. And so, I'm excited to dig into this episode a little bit with you, Bill, because like, how do
Yeah.
we help leaders, business owners, somebody in a position of leadership where it's not going their way, get out of the pit or get out of the despair, if you will, to start being productive and engaged. So
Okay. Yeah.
thoughts there?
Well, you know, uh, one example that comes to mind is I had a manager at a car dealership I was working with, and this guy decided the new policy was for his salespeople was to tell the customer who was calling in about a used car whatever they wanted to hear to get them to come down to the dealership, including lying about the
Oh
odometer
no.
readings. Yeah. Um, yeah, we had to, and that was the policy he wanted, and that was what the salespeople, most of the salespeople anyway, were doing.
Hmm.
And so we had to go in and fix that real quick because
Hmm.
it turns out it's not just unethical; it is
Yeah.
highly illegal.
Illegal.
Uh, yes, yeah, there could have been huge penalties for these guys. Um, yeah, the owners could have lost their shirts on it. But yeah, you have to be really careful about what policies you do, and you can't make your policies out of desperation. He was looking at having poor numbers for the month, and not realizing that he was doing something that could have gotten him canned and worse.
Mm.
So yeah, that was a pretty bad one. Um,
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I mean, I think that in this case, the misalignment was he had certain objectives which were in conflict with like you said,
right.
law and just some moral rights. I think sometimes it's not necessarily morally wrong. We have changes, and obviously in leadership, we just talked about that from the president on down. We have some, so there's a misalignment in that you had expectations of one person being in position of power or going in a certain direction, and so well now that's not the case, or perhaps there are external regulations or compliance updates that come along. So you're like, well, we used to do it this way. I mean, you and I are old enough where we used to go to be able to go to walk into the airport, go all the way to the terminal,
Right.
and
Yeah.
that felt like it was a reasonable expectation, right? I mean, go see our loved ones off, and it's like, well,
Hmm.
that's changed. So my
Right.
expectation or what I thought was reasonable and right and perfectly, and there was nothing wrong with it. Now that is actually illegal now. You have to go through this whole rigmarole to get through, you
Hmm.
know.
The security theater.
Right? Right? So there's there is there are always going to be, I guess what I want to try to say is there's always going to be some kind of misalignment, just because we're human beings and there's certain situations and circumstances
Hmm.
change. I mean, it could be as simple as a miscommunication in a policy rollout. Like I didn't get the comment, I didn't get the memo on that, right? Didn't you get the
Right.
memo? No. Right?
Yeah, yeah, or just a misunderstanding of what's been said. It could be worded poorly.
Hmm.
That's something that's often a problem. Is in the wording of the new policy or procedure, and people just don't get what it is, or it's so vague that people can interpret it however they want.
Yeah.
Um, Speaking of government stuff, I was watching some things on the Constitution, and some of what's in the Constitution was written purposefully vague, so that it could be reinterpreted later to fit whatever situation came along. Um, you know, which one? Article 5 of the Constitution, which allows for states to convene a convention, and there's no instructions there as far as how to actually run the convention,
Right.
or how to approve what the convention comes up with. And they did that so that states could come together and do it themselves. Instead of and it's actually probably a good thing, because the most detailed portion of the Constitution is about the rules having to do with Congress, and their hands end up getting tied more often than, say, the president, whose description is the shortest, and the president's power ends up being rather wide, because
Hmm.
it's like the Constitution doesn't say anything about being able to purchase the Louisiana Territory, but Thomas Jefferson did it anyway. And it doesn't say anything about the president being the commander in chief of the military, but George Washington established that in his presidency.
Hmm.
So, so
So
it's
yes, so these things can be like you said, there's vagueness in there, and so your
mhm,
expectations on how this is interpreted could go your way or couldn't go your way, and
right.
so you know I want to get into this episode really. What's the impact to the organization or the company when we have these misalignments? What's the impact on like perhaps team morale, the company culture? We've talked about this in the past, Bill.
Hmm.
When there is this misalignment with expectations, it's not aligned. Um, and how do we, how do we recognize that gap um, in ourselves and really
Hmm.
when there's a specific policy, so let's just, or initiative, and you're like, well, it's not said that I can't do this. It's like but then your team or group is like, whoa, I didn't understand that we were doing this. I didn't understand it was anticipated this way. So there's a gap there
Right.
in this as we look at things and then kind of assess it, we're like, whoa, there's talk a little bit about that, Bill, like, when we're seeing that, because obviously you're giving high level, government experiences, but
Right. Right.
bringing it down
Um,
even to the small organization.
well, to stick with my example of the car dealership, telling customers, saying whatever they had to say to get the customer to come down. Um, Basically, what it did was it just blew the morale of the people who realized that was unethical,
Hmm.
because they had to start thinking about, should I quit my job here?
Hmm.
Or at the very least, can I do my job here? Because it's like, I can't
Hmm.
tell people this.
Right.
And then the people who either didn't care or didn't realize what they were doing was wrong. Um, they were, they were the ones who were making money. They were making it kind of dishonestly,
Yep.
but they the basically it was looking like the dishonest people were succeeding,
Hmm.
and that which reminds me of one of the Psalms, but um,
Yeah.
which one? Yeah, I'd have to look it up to remember which one. But it's talking about how the wicked appear to thrive in
Well,
this world.
yeah, well,
You
that's a
know.
great point, because I think, we've we've used tools, we've talked about like the five voices for
Hmm.
personal alignment and organizational expectations. What you're saying, Bill, is, so if we have personal alignment and we're like, hey, there's a conflict with the organization here.
Yeah.
I think it's important, like you just mentioned with this car dealership, is what parts of this policy don't align with me personally or team values? And so you just identified, you said,
Right.
hey, look, our team, we're having difficulty with it. Now, some of them, it did align with them, and they're like, yeah, we're going to do it and we're going to lie. And actually, we value that. We value cheating people out, essentially, which is obviously not one
Right.
we celebrate here on the Business Roundtable podcast, but it
Yep.
is certainly one that's out there. It's a value.
Yep.
Um, right. Um, and you just offered some reasons why this policy should be maybe considered differently, or a different perspective. And I think it's important that
Yeah.
we look at that gap, right? And reflect at the differences. Doesn't mean they're going to be resolved necessarily. Hopefully they will, but we have to at least understand where is the disconnect, right?
Yeah. Yeah. Absolutely. Um, and that's why policies, a lot of in a lot of places. I mean, I guess in some instances there is no group to be able to decide on policies, because you've got an owner, very small business, very closely held,
Hmm.
perhaps even a family owned and
Hmm.
operated kind of thing, and so one person's just naturally making all those decisions, and
Yep.
may not know. I mean, they may not know enough to really be making certain decisions in certain businesses,
Hmm.
but going and creating a group that if you have a business of a size that can do this, that group made up of people from different departments, and that way the group can make decisions. You can still guide these policies, and you're kind of expected to guide the
Hmm.
the policy making decisions. But this way, the people and at all levels are involved in creating these policies, and thus the people of all levels are much more likely to adopt all of these policies.
Right.
Not only that, but you're also getting different perspectives. You're also getting different knowledge sets.
Hmm.
Somebody from your legal department may know that you can't be dishonest over the phone.
Right. Right.
And if you don't have somebody from the legal department involved in the process, then that information may never get out, and may not get in, worked into the policy creation. Somebody in your sales department may know that consumers expect A, B, and C, when they're being talked to over the phone or in person, and so that information needs to be brought in. Um,
You
somebody like from your janitorial department may have personal information about how just an average Joe, if you will, interacts with these policies, and so even people who aren't in direct line of succession
yep.
may have valuable information that you can use in creating these policies.
Yeah, you brought up a number of good points here, Bill, because we're getting into kind of this area of strategies for addressing this misalignment, and what I heard you just say was like use a feedback loop, find out, get
Mm-hmm.
check-ins from people, right? How is this policy or
Absolutely.
procedure impacting workflow, team morale? Are you regularly assessing this initiative? It may be been in place for a while, but are you looking at that and like you said, finding out, is this working the way intended?
Yeah.
Is it having the
Yeah.
positive impact or is it more negative? You know. Um, you also mentioned like getting certain people from the team, and like you said, clarifying the reasons behind this policy. Why is it this way? How it might impact the team? And again, getting people's input here, how we can reduce frustration, like you said, get adoption and build trust if you're actually opening and talking, with the team transparently, right? About here's what we're trying
Right.
to do. I think it's important to describe, um, if you're a person that's maybe on the other end, like it's applied to you, and you're like, I would seek an understanding of like why, who came up with this, what's the reasoning behind this policy before you start to change it, or it's like I don't like this, I don't like this one. Well, try to, like you said, Bill, maybe ask the question because maybe it has gone through legal, and legal's like, yeah, we really need to make sure this happens now, and they're like, I don't really like. In fact, I'm working with a client right now, Bill, where there's one employee that's really pushing back on getting their timesheets done in time. And it's like, well, it works better for me to submit them on Thursday instead of Monday. I'm like, I get it, but the policy is on Monday because we really need to have them done so we can do payroll and affects invoices and other things. And if you choose
Mm-hmm.
not to do that, and you say, well, I don't, if you don't understand why, you may feel like it's kind of arbitrary and capricious on you. Like, can't we just do it whenever we feel
Yeah.
like it? Or can I just do it? I'm doing it every week. I just do it on a Thursday instead of a Monday. Like, yes, every week it needs to be done, but it has to be done on a specific day for a specific reason, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Absolutely. Um, yeah, and especially if it's a legal reason as opposed to you this needs to be done. Period. And here's the reason why. Yeah, the reason why can often make all the difference in getting buy-in. Um, and Yeah, and definitely payroll is another good reason. I think most everybody can get behind payroll being done on time.
Yeah,
Uh,
right?
oh, sure, I pay my bills whenever, and nobody cares.
Uh-huh,
Yeah,
uh-huh.
that's not true. That's not true. Uh, so, but
How
yeah.
about the
Go ahead.
I got a follow-up question for you, Bill. So you gave some really good strategies on ways we can kind of address the misalignment.
Hmm.
Um, Perhaps even suggesting realistic tweaks or alternatives that might be better. But what would you what are some practical maybe adaptation tips that you would say to address policies without undermining them? Um, you know, or we want to discuss the ways that we're like, how do we adapt to these policies? We don't want to necessarily undermine them, if we know that they're there for a reason.
Hmm. Um, Well, explaining most people are reasonable that if you explain, like you were talking about, if you explain the reason behind the policy,
Mhm.
um, then most people are fairly reasonable and will understand. Oh, okay, that makes sense. Another thing that could come from that though is that the reason may not be a good one. And sometimes, like sometimes you might get an idea in your personal life and go, "Oh, this sounds great," and then you speak it out loud, and all of a sudden it's like, oh no, that's terrible.
Yeah.
And speaking it out loud, especially to a third party, that third party might go, hearing it for the first time, go, that doesn't make any sense.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And then you can work your way through it and go, oh, you know what, maybe this policy isn't the best policy. And if we tweaked it this way or that way, then that would be better. And it may just be a matter of speaking it aloud. That I've done that before, where even just on my own, hearing it out loud,
Mm-hmm.
and going, "Oh no, that was a terrible idea. That shouldn't have ever been spoken into existence." Uh, but but yeah, so sharing it with someone, someone in the business, someone you trust outside the business. Um, those can be ways to do it. I had one client, a church to be specific, that I was working with, and they felt they needed a new sound system, and so they talked to me, and the pastor talked to me, and I said, no problem, we can get this all figured out. We'll use a continuous improvement team. I'll put it together, and we'll meet at the church, and we'll come up with a plan. And I brought together the pastor, of course, the minister of music, and a sound tech from outside that the pastor knew, and a professional musician I knew, who was doing sound at another church that had an
Mm-hmm.
incredible sound system. And we sat down and we looked at all the details and talked it out, and realized that they didn't need a completely new sound system. The way the church was built, it was built for an organ and a choir, and we figured out how to use the existing acoustics to change the way the sound system that they had worked, and all we needed to get was a new soundboard. And and I think in some ways for that one, having a sane process. The pastor later told me it was the first time they'd had a meeting in that church while he was there that didn't end in an argument.
Oh boy.
And
Wow.
I mean, I hate to speak of churches in a bad light, but that happens. Uh,
Yep. Churches are
but
just
yeah,
organization with people
it's
just like businesses. You know.
yep, for sure. But between having a sane and established procedure for the team to follow, and having in outside professionals, that the people could say, oh, okay, it's all third party everything
Mm-hmm.
to make sure that everyone's like, oh, these are professionals. These are real professionals, not the volunteers who've been working for years in the church like myself.
Mm-hmm.
And so everybody was very respectful, and the ideas just were flowing. And when it came down to it, the people who had said originally we need a new sound system even were saying, okay, great, I can totally see how this would work. And
Mm.
we got it done. They ended up only having to spend a few grand on a new soundboard, and instead of having to spend 200 grand on a new sound system, um, then
Yeah, that's powerful,
everybody went
Bill.
away happy. Yeah.
I mean,
Um,
what I hear you saying, Bill, is there's in this particular circumstance, the overarching goal was we want to improve the sound at quality at the church. In this case,
right.
this is the mission. This is what we're going to do. We're going to improve the sound. However, the methods, how you got there, can differ
Mhm.
quite wildly in achieving the goals. And so I think there's an initiative or a direction to go. And oftentimes I think maybe feel like you said, maybe it's there's they only see one method of getting there. And I think if
Right.
you can understand the goal of where we're trying to get to and say, you know what, I see your goal. I don't necessarily agree with the methods and how you're getting there. We
Mhm.
can, but like you said, we can have a productive conversation, on how best to get there. And so we don't, like you said, end up in an argument because, like, aren't we all trying to get here? Well, yes. Okay. Well, then what if we try this, like you just said, Bill? Oh, and that still
Mhm.
gets us there? Yes. Oh, okay. Well, then I'm okay with shifting the procedure then. I
Yeah.
understand where that's going, right?
Yeah, yeah, and it works perfectly well with non-physical policies,
Mhm.
as well, that or procedures, and just getting, like you said, getting to a given goal,
Mhm.
and yeah, and we all wanna get there. We want the company to run smoothly. We want payroll to be done on time. Um, we want the consumer experience to be excellent. And
Right.
because we depend on a survey that sorry, car dealers usually use surveys to determine how well they've done, and most of them, if you don't mark excellent on all the questions, then the manufacturer considers it to be a failure,
Oh
and so
man.
they get penalized for it. And so, um, but yeah, yeah, using a continuous improvement team for creating and modifying policies is a great idea, because it maximizes the use of your team resources.
Yeah. Yeah, so that gets to, this more long-term approach for misalignment. Um
Hmm.
and like you just said, mentioned, Bill, I think having advocate for policy review cycles, some regular review, right? And see what's relevant,
Hmm.
what's still relevant, and what needs to be modified. We don't want to set it and forget it,
Yeah,
right?
right, right. And your
I mean,
policies need to be living.
yes. I mean, I think I look at, laws that we put on the books, right? And some laws are meant
Hmm.
to be there for 5 years, or then they can choose to renew them if they feel that they're being effective or not. But maybe the
Right.
method needs to shift. We're here in California, for example, where there's a gas tax uh, based on, basically calculations from the 70s in roughly on how
Hmm.
people drove and how they impact the road. Well,
Right.
we have a lot more fuel efficient cars now. We have other things that don't even use gas primarily. So the gas tax, as a policy, may not be as effective as it once was. And so we have to come about it in a thoughtful, considerate way of how do we address this. And there's different ways to get about it. I work in the environmental
Hmm.
consulting world, and so there's you know different ways of assessing those vehicle miles traveled, for example, is one. But there's all different ways, and so I would say we want to build a culture of adaptability and foster where people can voice concerns about misalignments. And I think one thing that I do appreciate being in our country, in the United States, is that we do have peaceful transfer of power and ways of being. That's our goal, anyways, is that we want to be able to vote and share our concerns. And even if it's not even if it's not doesn't go the way we want it to go, we still have the opportunity to share and to voice our opinion. I think creating a
Hmm.
culture that allows you to speak that, because while it may not be completely relevant, your point may be not as relevant today. Who knows? Situations and circumstances may change to where that actually now may
Yeah.
become very practical, right, Bill?
Hmm. Yeah. And yeah, you're absolutely right. It's great that we live in a country where the opposition party can or the minority party can voice their opinions and be heard, and still influence the way things get done, even though the majority could easily walk all over them.
Hmm.
Um, and businesses, I feel businesses should be the same way, where you should be open to hearing what your employees have to say on a subject, because they are the people, they are the boots on the ground. They're the ones fighting at the front lines for
Hmm.
your company, whatever that job may entail. And so in many ways they may know better than you what's going on in the business.
Hmm.
And even though you have your hands in everything, you're not there.
Yeah.
somewhere. There's somewhere you're not, and unless you're God. If you're God, then yes, you can be there too. But most businesses aren't run directly by the Lord. So
No.
no, but so yeah, so really you should be listening to the people in your company, and even if you don't agree with them, their opinions are valuable, and
Mhm.
you should look into what those opinions are, why they have them, and what the possible repercussions could be of enacting such a policy.
Yeah. I'm reading a book right now, I have it in front of me here. It's actually an interesting book called 10x is easier than 2x. It's a very interesting
Okay.
book. Um, and it challenges you to think differently in that, if you want to go really have growth mindset and get to a new way of being,
Hmm.
we want to think exponentially versus kind of just, 2x. If you think of what you can do and accomplish, and I think creating a team, helping create a team that has a growth mindset in a way of
Hmm.
like, yeah, well, we don't necessarily agree with this policy or procedure, or we don't think this is working. Okay, well, let's dream and let's look bigger in what could be. And and having that, I think is a really great strategy long term for you, both long term and short term. But what I think what you're saying, what I hear you saying, Bill, is that we want we want this at all levels in the organization. We want it from the
Yeah.
employees all the way down, all the way up, all the way up and down. And so, if we're not seeking understanding and we're not proposing adaptations, not having open dialogue, it's definitely going to affect our ability to reach these larger
Hmm.
goals, right?
Yeah.
Um,
Absolutely.
I mean, so as we're kind of getting to the end of the podcast for this go around, Bill, I mean, one of the things I know you and I love to do as coaches and consultants is really help get leaders and teams unstuck. And so,
Mhm.
you know, what would you encourage, or just as we're wrapping up, what would you encourage listeners to to do as if they're struggling perhaps with these policies or procedures, and how they might be able to get somebody like a third party in there, or just what's your key takeaway for them of hey, I'm stuck?
Well, I would start with the resources you already have. You have employees. You might have investors. Um, you have people who are concerned with the well-being of your business.
Mm,
It's in their best interest that the company do well, and I would start by speaking with them.
mm.
Um, I certainly hope you trust them. Um,
Yes. Yeah.
if not, that could be part of your problem. But but yeah, yeah. Start with the resources you have, and work from there. Then maybe reach out to somebody you've seen here on the show, and and get a third party in there to take a 30,000 foot look, and a different get a different angle on it, and on the problem, and get to work.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean that those are great suggestions, Bill. There's great tools you could probably already use in your organization, some surveys or just candid
Mm-hmm.
conversations with your team. But I would say, you should probably having some productive maybe conflict or collision in policies or procedures, because if you're not, I would challenge you to say maybe you're not growing as well as you could, because as
Mm-hmm.
we're seeing in our world today, you know whatever you've set in motion now is could be obsolete in a month, 2 months, a year from now, or it could be very ineffective as a policy
Yeah.
or procedure. So if your team is just saying, well, you know what, we like typewriters and they're great at creating papers and reports. I'm like, yeah, that could be absolutely true, but I think we could be much more productive and effective if we did not mandating everybody uses typewriters. You know what I mean? But I'm being extreme
Right.
kind of, in jest here. But that's the reality of some of the things. If we say, oh, well, we just did it this way and this is the way it should be done. And for a time, that's great. And then, we need to look where it starts to get out of alignment and get realigned. And so Bill, appreciate you coming on the podcast once again. And I think
My
we're going to
pleasure.
revisit this topic, because I think there's a lot more to get into
Yeah, for sure.
of realignment. And we've talked about in previous episodes. One of my favorite episodes we talked about with you, Bill, was kind of reconciliation and healing.
Hmm.
And if you guys have missed that episode, go back into our archive, check it out. It was a really great episode. But when you're misaligned, there's sometimes, depending on how bad the misalignment is, there could be some really uh, long time that's going to need to be in the healing process. And Bill, that was really appreciate, just came back to me, that episode that we talked about that and
Hmm.
being realigned. So
Great. I'm glad you
yeah,
enjoyed it.
yes, absolutely. Um, Thank you, Bill, again. Thank you guys for listening to the Business Roundtable podcast. We love coming to you every week. For those of you watching us on YouTube or catching us on LinkedIn, we appreciate your comments and feedback. Of course, also wherever you find us on your favorite podcast platform, be it Apple, Spreaker, you name it, Apple, all of the different podcast platforms were there. We appreciate your 5-star reviews. Leave your comments, and let us know what you want to hear more of. Let me know if you would like to be a guest on the podcast. We've had numerous new guests and as part of the podcast this past year, and we're excited to continue to bring that into you as we go into the 2025 or around in the corner there. And I'm sure you'll see Bill again. So thank you all for
Yep.
listening in. Until next time, take care, everybody.